Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome my listeners and viewers in the United States and all around the world. I am Vince Rocco, and it is Tuesday morning here in New York City, so let's go behind the headlines and get the real story. But first, this is Talking New York Real Estate. Up front today, the recent increase in mortgage interest rates has introduced a new dynamic to the New York City real estate market, impacting both buyers and sellers alike. As borrowing costs rise, the affordability of mortgage diminishes, leading to a potential slowdown in purchasing activity. Higher interest rates can deter prospective buyers from entering the market or limit their purchasing power, particularly for those who are on the cusp already of affordability. This has contributed to the cooling off in our market and in demand in general. And the increases in interest rate can also affect existing homeowners or sellers, particularly those with adjustable rate mortgages or considering refinancing. Higher mortgage payments may strain household budgets, potentially leading to a decreased consumer spending and a slowdown in our broader economy. We will discuss that, and we will have so much more as Talking New York Real Estate gets underway on this Tuesday morning. And in the news this morning, roughly 1 in 37 homes are now considered seriously underwater in the United States, and that share is much higher across a swath of southern states, according to data out last week. Nationally, 2.7% of homes carried loan balances of at least 25% more than their market value. This according to the first quarter 2024 U.S. Home Equity and Underwater Report from ATOM, a real estate data firm. Mortgages can generally become seriously underwater when someone has an adjustable rate from the early post-pandemic days when interest rates were more than historically low to help stimulate the economy and the housing market. But now, with higher interest rates that were meant to curb inflation, homeowners are beginning to feel the squeeze. They can no longer afford their monthly payments. And the 4th of July fireworks extravaganza is returning to the Hudson River for the first time over a decade. Hosted over the East River since 2014, the annual fireworks show will switch to the west side for the 2024 event. Macy's announced this last week. The best spots to take in the extravaganza will be between West 14th Street and West 34th Street and along the North New Jersey waterfront. And a penthouse atop a new condo building in Chelsea is hitting the market this week for $40 million. That's right, $40 million, marking the neighborhood's most expensive property currently on the market. Designed in collaboration between Robert A.M. Stern Architects and Olson Kundig, the Cortland at 522 West 22nd Street is a 25-story tower with waterfront views and 144 luxury residences. The penthouse has 5,760 square feet and includes 2 outdoor terraces with 360-degree views. If it sells, it will become Chelsea's most priciest deal. And there will be one less celebrity in the Hamptons this summer if Drew Barrymore finds a buyer for her ritzy East End Place on Long Island. The host of the Drew Barrymore Show just listed her converted barn for $8.45 million. Barrymore bought the 1.7-acre Sagaponack estate in 2019 for a reported $5.5 million, but remodeled the entire house. The original barn on the property was built in 1920. Barrymore's upgrades might be the least traditional, but they certainly will be the most interesting and stylish. And finally, according to our chief economist here, Greg Heim, New York City has 340,500 millionaires, 744 centimillionaires, and 60 billionaires. Over the past 10 years, the number of millionaires living in New York City has jumped by 48%. Second on the list is the Bay Area, which has 305,000 millionaires, but 8 more billionaires than New York. The Bay Area has seen its millionaire population rise by 82% over the past decade. And a very belated Happy Mother's Day to all of you out there who listen and watch. Hopefully your day was special. And with me today are Todd Stevens, broker of record for all of New York State, Carolyn Fox, Ellegren Forbes Global Properties, Peter Runningen from Compass, and Greg Heim, the aforementioned chief economist, host of the very popular podcast Crossing the Line, and he is here from Brown Harris Stevens.
This beautiful set here at Studio 1873 is brought to you by the Everset. The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
Okay, good morning, everybody. This is going to be an exciting show. Listen, we're almost halfway through 2024, which to me, I don't even know how that happened. My brother reminded me over the weekend that we're almost at 4th of July, and I said, wait a minute, let's hold it. We still have Memorial Day coming. Okay, so let's just calm down. Well, what I want to do in this episode is talk about where, we've come from January to now, where we predict, later on we'll talk about predictions, where we're going to go between now and the end of the year. And as I mentioned before, the aforementioned host of Crossing the Line and also our chief economist here at Brown Harris Stevens, Greg Heim. He has all of our numbers and all of our updates. So, Greg, if you can, I want to start with you. Can you give us a high-level picture of where we are from an economic perspective, from a job market perspective, and, of course, how it has been affecting the housing market? I mean, we'll pick apart Crossing the Line in a minute, but just as an overall, where did we start at the beginning of the year, and in your opinion, where are we today?
Why don't we just insert the tape from my podcast?
There you go. We can do that too.
Easier.
There was a lot of hope at the beginning of the year because mortgage rates fell over 1% between November and December. So we were thinking inflation is coming down, rates are following. That's good. That's a lot of hope heading into the new year. And you saw a little bit of pickup in activity here in New York City to start the year. The problem is, all of a sudden, the jobs numbers kept blowing away forecasts, showing us still a pretty hot economy, and the inflation numbers first flattened out and then started picking up again slightly. So that brought rates higher with it, and rates have been over 7% for the last 5 weeks. 7's always a lucky number, but not so lucky when it comes to mortgage rates.
Not when it comes to mortgage rates.
So we've seen a noticeable slowdown again in activity where we're below last year's levels. Every week we look at the contract signed data, and we're typically anywhere from 5 to 15% below. And that's not good because last year no one was happy either. So I think that we have this challenge where the Fed can't get into the end zone by getting rates to 2% where they want it because we're seeing inflation, which the majority of the problem with inflation is housing. Housing is the biggest component of the consumer price index. Rents and sales prices are not declining with any significance.
And didn't you tell me this morning the CPI this morning was higher than
PPI.
PPI.
This is the week of the PI brothers, as I call them, the PPI and the CPI.
There you go.
Producer prices rose more than expected. People don't pay a lot of attention to the producer price index, even though if it's costing the producers more, you can be sure they're going to pass that on to us when we buy the stuff, right? The CPI gets more of the love, and that comes out in a couple of days. And we also have retail sales this week. So a lot of important data. The thing that's confounding a lot of economists is how is a consumer continuing to spend when this weight of this inflation over the last 2.5 years is brutal. Credit card debt is at a record high, at record high rates. It's become hard to understand. We know people saved a lot of money during the pandemic, but that seems to be gone. At least that's what these economists that examine these things tell us. But you look from a national perspective, at least the latest data, which is pending home sales and new home sales, which are based on when contracts are signed, actually picked up sharply last month. So I do think in some places, maybe not here yet, people are accepting the fact that rates are this high. They're going to stay this high. But just remember two things we always like to remind people. Over the last half century, the average mortgage rate has been 7.8%.
Correct.
Not 5%, not 4%, not 3%, 7.8%. And we had a housing bubble in 2006. When I bought my house, rates were 6.5%, 6 3/4.
Yeah, I bought an apartment in 2006. Yeah.
And people have to remember that, there's two sides to rates. There's borrowing rates like mortgages, and then there's savings rates.
Exactly.
And if you look at the spread between what you borrow at and what you get on your savings, it's narrower than it was before the pandemic. So that's why, too, a lot of economists are now pointing out that, you know what? The Fed hiking rates was actually good for the economy because people were all of a sudden getting 5% interest instead of 0.25%. Baby boomers are driving, the spending. They're the ones with all the money left, and they tend to keep it in cash or at least in, money market CDs. So people think the Fed's thing has not brought us into recession. GDP was weaker than expected in the first quarter, but that could change. And a lot of that had to do with trade balance. So I'm not so worried about the economy going into recession, although we can't rule it out just yet. The stock market seems to be loving life. We found out this year. You mentioned the story about the millionaires in New York. I mentioned we may get a bunch more because
by the way, what is a centimillionaire? I didn't understand.
100 million.
Oh, okay. There you have it. Oh, pardon me.
You know, do you really have to keep naming it after, like, you get to a certain level? It's like too rich.
That's
That's what it means.
I
didn't
want
even
some.
go there, but yeah, okay.
But-
Cinti, too rich.
You mentioned it's only the middle of May, and there's a consulting firm that has come out and said Wall Street bonuses are going to be big this year. You know, a lot can happen in markets in 7 months, but you know, Wall Street paid almost $34 billion in cash bonuses for last year. We should be busier than we are. I think people can complain about uncertainty all the time. When was life certain?
I don't understand uncertainty, but I agree with you. I mean, we should be a lot busier, and we're going to ask our experts here in a few minutes about that from a feet on the street perspective. But it always seems to me that the housing market is the most affected. Anytime we have a downturn, anytime we have, you know, PPI problem, you know, CPI problem, you know, inflation.
God forbid a PCE problem, then we're really
whatever. But the bottom line is, it always seems to look. What did I say at the top of the show? 37% of homes are underwater or heading underwater because interest rates are going high. They started out with 4%, 5%, in some cases 3.5%, right? And then when the adjustable rate adjusts, now all of a sudden they're at 7%, 8%. You know, that's double their monthly payments. They can't do that, right? So housing always is effective, but in very strong way. But I wanted to ask you also, because you're always telling me that, you know, when we talk about the Fed interest rate being X, it doesn't really translate to the mortgage interest rate. Can you please explain that to our listeners out there, because it is a little confusing.
And I'll try not to sound too much like an economics professor.
Well, but you are.
The rate the Fed adjusts is called the federal funds rate. That's when you see the headline, Fed raises rates, that's what they're talking about. The federal funds rate is a rate that banks used to charge each other for overnight loans. You know, banks have to keep a certain amount of money on deposit with the Fed because you want to make sure if people go in for their money, it'll be there, right? Unless you're SVB, then you don't want people coming in taking out $1 million a second. But so it's not really used anymore because after the financial crisis, we now require banks to keep a hell of a lot more money on deposit with the Fed, and they're paid very handsome interest on it. So it's not even really used. What it is it's the gas pedal or the brake on the economy. What they do with short-term rates has no direct correlation to long-term. In fact, it can have the reverse. So what does that mean? Let's say the Fed decided, hey, let's do something really dumb. Let's cut rates today.
Fed doing something dumb?
Right? That would be, the Fed cutting rates would bring short-term rates down, but most certainly bring mortgage rates up because those 30-year mortgage rates are based on what the future is for inflation. And if you're cutting rates at a time when you don't need to, you already have pretty solid, you know, economic growth and job growth, people are going to worry about inflation in the future. And that's why people shouldn't say, well, the Fed cut rates, I could afford a house. The Fed hasn't touched rates since July. Have mortgage rates moved? Yeah, a heck of a lot.
Right.
You know, they move every day almost. So if you're waiting for the Fed to announce they're cutting rates, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be in touch with your real estate professionals, your bankers. Find out what's available. 30-year rate isn't your only option. You mentioned adjustable rates like they're a bad thing, and maybe they're not right for everybody. Also,
no, I've had adjustable rates in the past. They're fine.
If you have a relationship with a bank, you can talk to them. You know, they offer special products for good customers by good people with a lot of money. And, you know, you can...
There's always something.
We have to remember that, you know, everybody uses the expression, you marry the home, you date the rate.
Date the rate.
Like that expression.
Well, then I came up, no, I didn't. I don't know, who cares? Someone should have copyrighted that. So anyway,
it sounds good.
Yeah.
Right? It sounds good.
To answer your question, typically, the longer I'm going to lend you money, the higher rate of interest I want, because there's uncertainty, right? If I lend you money at 3%, you know, for 30 years, 3 years ago, I'm going to be a little upset now.
Yeah.
I could have got twice that. But what happens in an economy like we're in now, we actually had an inverted yield curve where short-term rates actually became higher than long-term rates because the Fed was hiking the short-term rates. Now that the long-term rates are coming up because inflation just won't go away, that's what you need to look for. If you're really trying to determine when rates are going to go down, look at the inflation numbers. You know, PPI wasn't great. We'll see what CPI says. And the Fed's favorite number, which is something called core PCE. that's the one that they watch because that's the most complete measure of spending and inflation. So keep an eye on that. Stop focusing on what the Fed's doing. And remember, New York City is unique compared to most markets because we actually have inventory. We have stuff to sell. It's not at a historic low.
Good point.
And prices are drifting lower. The last thing I'll say is this market is a lot like 18 and 19 were. And I don't mean 19, 18, 19, a little bit older.
Okay.
When you don't have a recession, prices take longer to adjust. You know, even COVID happened so fast, we didn't know what the heck was going on. By the time we worried about where prices were, we reopened and things took off. So we're at a case right now where no one seems to know where pricing needs to be to attract those buyers because of the uncertainty with the rates and everything else. So there's still a lot going for the housing market here. We have a good economy. New York City's lagged the rest of the country, but Wall Street has made truckloads of money. They've given it to their employees. So we're ready to go.
And what do they do? And what are they doing with it?
Vince,
I don't know.
I'm sorry. Could I ask a question
Of course
for the
you can.
chief economist? So I've been wondering these past few months, because we have a Fed Reserve, and the Fed Reserve is cut off into sections across the country. We have geographic territories, right? We also have real estate loans. We have business loans. We have other kinds of loans. In your history, do you remember our government ever saying, okay, we're going to reduce the interest rate in the Northeast because the housing hasn't bubbled as much as it did in the rest of America or Idaho or California, and then we're going to keep the rates the same in other territories? And then my second question would be, has the Fed Reserve ever said, okay, we're going to keep business loans at this rate, but we're going to keep residential loans at this different interest rate? Have these things ever happened?
No. The Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC, that's the group that sets monetary policy. There are a board of governors from some of the banks that sit that are presidents of the regional banks: New York, San Francisco, Atlanta, St. Louis. So they do that stuff, but from a national level, because how could you control that? It's like, we're going to lower rates here but not there, or we're going to print money here but not there. So no, monetary policy goes through the Board of Governors, and it has to be universal from that regard. The other thing too is we don't want to say that the Fed lowers mortgage rates or the Fed increases business loan rates, because they don't do that. Right. What they do is they really control the supply of money. It's like any other good. The more of it there is, the price goes down, right? When it's less, the price goes up. There's an inverse relationship between price and rate. So there's more money out there, rates would go up because money's cheaper. I know that sounds really weird to people, but just trust me, it's true. But they don't control. Now, some of these rates, the prime rate, credit card rates, are directly tied to some of the things the Fed controls. But mortgage rates aren't. They're more setting a tone. Either the economy's running too hot, the economy's running too cold, and they don't just change the rate. They'll actually go out into markets and either buy U.S. Treasuries back or sell them also. So there's multiple ways they can try to get the economy going, but they all have to be done through the FOMC. And, they put out a statement after every meeting saying exactly what they're going to do. They're not a lot of fun to read.
I think you can tell I wish the Fed would change the rules a little bit so New York City could prosper a little bit more, but I guess things are the way they are.
Well, yes. We of course, we think we're special here in New York City. I'm sure San Francisco thinks they are, and Dallas and every other major city. I mean, parts of this country are vastly different, for sure. And being the financial capital of the world here sets us apart from other places. But everything has to be controlled through the Board of Governors.
All right, we have to take a short break. No one's going anywhere. We're coming right back. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. Don't go anywhere.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business, and it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table, and emotion too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.
Okay, everybody, we are back. So, Carolyn, let me ask you, based on what Greg was saying before, inventory seems to be there. I mean, there are a lot of inventory issues in a lot of cities in our nation affecting the housing market. But inventory, if you want something, it's there.
I agree.
So, from in your opinion, working with buyers out there, what seems to be the hesitation? During the commercial break, we were talking about how you and I, for example, way back when we bought our first properties, 12% interest, 15, 16,
Exactly.
18% interest.
Exactly.
And we thought, okay, well, it is what it is. But I never really even thought about, is that a high number, a low number? I could afford the payment. I could afford the purchase price. Done. Why in this marketplace, we're down to 7, which is higher than we've been. Why can't buyers accept the fact that, also as Greg said, historically, that's about the average, interest rate anyway?
Because lots of these buyers weren't alive then. It's irrelevant to them.
Oops.
Yeah.
There we
So
go. Oops.
I may have paid a 17 or 18% interest rate, but the price of the home was so much lower than it is now. So you're getting socked in the face with a boom boom. And I think it's not just about the rates. Yes, that is important. I think there is still systemic fear that's affecting the marketplace. And I don't think that fear is going to be abated anytime before the election. I think people are paralyzed. They're still recovering from the effects of COVID and how that's changed their lives. So yes, interest rates is one of the issues, but I don't think it's the only issue that are keeping buyers at bay.
I happen to think you're correct, but one of the things I think about all the time is that there is fear out there, there is uncertainty out there, as he said a little while ago. We don't necessarily understand what that uncertainty is, right? But back in the day when I was first buying things, the purchase price was lower. Yes, the interest rate was higher, but yet our salaries were lower. So I kind of agree that those buyers weren't born then, but everything is kind of relative,
Absolutely.
right? The lower prices, the higher interest rates, but our salaries. I remember when I made $50,000 for the first time in my life, I thought, oh my God, I died and went to heaven.
Exactly.
And on $50,000, I owned a BMW, I owned a condo, I went on 6 vacations a year.
Yeah.
6
Okay.
But
vacations
you
in a
weren't
year.
paying.
I went on 6 vacations a year, and 3 of them were in Europe. $50,000 a year. It's
you,
like, wow,
you
how
weren't
do you do that?
paying $8 for a gallon of milk.
Correct.
I'm stunned when I look at the food prices.
Well,
Well,
Americans are spending
don't get
the
me started
highest
with food prices.
percentage of the disposable income on food in over 30 years.
So that's something to
That
look
is,
at.
well, I think it's all the things that we think are necessities
Yeah.
that weren't even invented too all those years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at my cell phone bill, I want to cry
Yeah.
each month.
Yeah.
To name one.
Yeah.
I cry at every pill that comes in the house every day.
I just throw it out.
And I love to cook, so every time I'm in the grocery store and I walk out with that little
Yeah.
white bag and it's $75, I think, what the hell did
Yeah,
you just buy
exactly.
for $75?
It was the big bottle of gin.
I guess.
Then I think that's
No,
what
I
it
didn't
was.
even get to that stop yet. That's the problem. That's the next stop on the way. Peter, from your perspective, buyers out there are, I believe wanting to buy, they want to get, buy a piece of that rock. They want to be involved. Millennials, Gen Z, probably a little too soon yet. And I want to ask Greg a little later about, they're in such debt, Gen Z, 25% higher than anybody else. But from your perspective, millennials out there, any buyer out there, what do you see being their hesitation in pulling that trigger? Is it interest rates? Is it the purchase price? Is it the lack of negotiability in their mind? Is it fear, as Carolyn said, of post-pandemic phobia? What is it? I mean, what's happening?
I think that fear is a huge part of it. I think it's a generational difference on when do you buy a home, when is it the right time to move in. I've seen a small bubble of people doing co-living now, which has affected
Co-living.
a lower, influx of people buying and selling. And, I think going into predictions too, I think we're going to have a lot more millennials coming in later. It's just that hesitation with, staying it with their parents is the new norm.
But all right, staying with the parents, because I was going to say rental prices, they came down just a tad in the last year or so.
Tiny bit.
But,
Tiny bit.
But they're still relatively high.
Uh-huh.
Yes,
So
they are.
for those who are renting, saying, well, I can't really afford to jump into that purchase market just yet, but they're still paying very high rents for really nothing. I mean, they can leave tomorrow and take nothing with them but their furniture, right?
It's psychological, I think. Even if you lay out the numbers, like this is what you would be paying monthly, take out the interest rates, the scary news, everything, the NAR settlement scared a few people. And
Well, that's another
you
thing.
just tell them, like, this is what you're paying rental monthly. This is what you would pay in a mortgage. Mortgage would be less. It's just that.
But
that
you have to have the
scary.
down payment. So
Yeah,
that's
sure.
what my kids who are millennials who live in San Francisco, LA, they don't, and they make a nice living. My son makes about $100,000 a year. My daughter and her husband make $500,000 a year, and they still can't come up with that down payment
See, that's
because the
the
cost
thing.
of living is so darn
Well,
high.
it's funny.
But that's I mean, that's really important, and it's relative
Well,
because they're not alone.
But that's one side to the thing, and this is something you talk about Gen Zs. I have one of those at home,
Yeah.
but he's only 16, so I'll just
Well.
I'll let it slide. The number one thing I think we don't teach financial education. to kids.
25% more in debt than millennials,
Right, we do not
according to your data.
teach anybody all the useless things. As Paul Simon said when I look back on all the crap I learned in high
Paul
school.
Simon.
We don't teach people about debt, about investing, and we have each generation, especially as pensions go by with each generation, they're not saving, they're not even thinking about a 401k. I can't afford it. It's like, trust me, the one time you can afford it is when you first start working, when you get a mortgage and Vince's BMW and everything else you get.
$50,000 a year.
I think the other side to it, and I'm not picking on your kids, I'm sure they're wonderful.
You shouldn't,
Is
because they're actually loaded. They're just really
no.
responsible with debt.
That's the thing, and not teaching. There's this movement called FIRE, Financial Independence, Retire Early, and what they
I haven't heard
preach
that
is
one. Okay.
people. Is a movie, actually a documentary called Playing with Fire, and there's a couple from California that decides they live right by the beach, but they realize that it's not their favorite thing to do, so they basically pack up, live with each other's parents for 6 months each, save money for a down payment, and they move to Oregon. And they find that they're happier. She trades in her leased BMW for a 20-year-old Honda.
Mine was owned, man. Mine was
I
owned.
mean, there are choices. I don't have sympathy here because I was 36 when I bought my house. So I waited. We had a variety of decisions we were making and things we were saving for. Nobody bought houses in their 20s when I was, in
Nobody.
my 20s. It didn't happen because even, at my advanced age, although not Vince's age, you couldn't borrow money from your parents. In the 50s, maybe they gave you $5,000 and
Right.
you bought a house. But
They gave me money to go to school. They weren't going to give
right.
me money to buy a
in
house.
2006, when
done.
I bought
You're
my
finished.
house, even then, the down payments were approaching 6 figures even and
Yeah.
to live in the suburbs.
Yeah.
I live in Long Island. So I think you have to have a plan and you have to prioritize what's most important. Is it, living in a certain area? Is it driving expensive cars? We all have things that we really want, but you have to look at the percentage of your income that you're saving.
Well, I want to ask you
oh,
later
sorry,
about the 25% of Gen Z. They're in debt. Why are they in debt, and what is that causing? Todd, I want to ask you though. Are there any demographic shifts or changes in consumer preferences that could be influencing the kind of slowdown of our market, aside from interest rates,
Yes.
aside from whatever? What do you think about that?
Right, absolutely. And I think that our chief economist brings up an important point as far as FIRE and so forth. I mean, it used to be, when I
I learned
moved
something
to-
new. I didn't even know about fire.
Oh,
okay.
I think about it every day.
Well, I'm gonna
let's
ask him
retire
later.
right now.
Trust me.
But when I moved to New York City, when I moved to Manhattan, was it 1996? I thought to myself,
That's when I moved to New York
are you
City.
serious? Wow.
Okay, there you go.
But I thought to myself, wow, I'm in Manhattan. I'm at the top of the world, and maybe because I was in my 20s, I'm better than everybody else, whatever.
Of course we were.
Right? My
Of course we
mindset.
were.
Right? But today's mindset, it's shifted. It's now okay to live in Oregon. We don't look down at people for escaping, living in Oregon, living in Colorado, Utah, Alabama. I mean, we have people moving from New York to Alabama. Right? And this is really what's going on. So I think that I don't know.
Well, the
where they're
millennials
hiding
are on
money.
the move. That's very true.
Yeah, they're on the move, and people are still progressing to the suburbs. Our suburbs outside of New York City, Rockland, Fairfield,
Westchester.
Dutchess, Westchester,
Nassau
Long
County,
Island.
Nassau
the best
County.
place to live.
You put a price of a property up. You put a property up for the price it was valued at, say, 2 years ago. It will sell at the full price and maybe over the asking price, right? Because people are still wanting a backyard. They're still wanting to escape, especially, say, Dutchess, and as we move, away from New York City. And then we still have an incoming group to New York City, which I don't want to take up all the time, but we could talk forever with. There are people moving from different states, such as Texas and Florida.
But let me ask you this, though. I agree with you 100%, and that's very accurate and well said. However, what is driving that? People moving here and moving there, and for the first time moving to Alabama, from New York City or wherever. Is it because they aren't making enough money? Is it because they can't afford the cost of living? I mean, a bag of food, $75 when it used to be 20.
Well, I think it's more
what's
than
driving
the money.
that?
I think as I have
Because in the
fantasized-
suburbs, I got to tell you something. I go to the suburbs, regularly, and the food up there is just as pricey as it is here.
It is just as pricey, yes.
I
It's
have
ridiculous.
fantasized about living in Birmingham, Alabama myself.
God
help you.
Honestly, well, I can have a
Oh,
pool.
that's scary.
I can have
Well, we
everything.
moved to Muscle Shoals, so we hang out.
No,
make
but
records, it's good.
Just teasing.
I would never think that 5 years ago because I would think like, oh my goodness, I'm throwing everything away. I'm throwing away my reputation.
Well,
'cause
you've
I'm
got a
gonna
very
move to
big career.
Birmingham,
You can't go to
Alabama.
Birmingham.
you-
Alabama.
Well, I'm not going to go to Birmingham. I'm just saying that
Well, because
today's
the
world,
technology is there
yeah.
now.
Well, technology,
that,
and there's just no more discrimination as far as like, oh, he moved here, he moved there, she moved there.
Well,
Yeah.
You can move to a smaller city.
Well.
Or, sure, come on. Vince,
Whatever.
you know that. Anyway, and then, boy, where else was my mind going? Oh, yes, and we have
Back
the
to the
people,
fantasy.
Yeah. Well, other than the fantasy, the incoming New Yorkers, we have people moving
Yes.
from Texas and Florida and other states that are changing their state laws.
Yep.
And I've met them. I don't know what's legal or illegal for me to talk about, but people who feel unsafe in these other states who are living these alternative lifestyles. And we're meeting them every day here in New York City. And they are what's driving our economy.
Carolyn, let me ask you, because you
Yes.
mentioned your two kids live in California, one in San Francisco, one in LA. So when you talk about housing market, okay, pricing, interest rates, whatever interest rates are the same, what are they telling you about the housing market out there? I have a lot of friends who I used to work with here in New York who now live and work in LA and say the market's kind of slow there too.
Yes, it is.
What do
It
they-
is
what do they-
slow,
what do they
and-
say?
And they have a serious inventory problem.
Okay.
And that's and that's because of a whole host of reasons, not the least of which is, developers are sitting on the sidelines. They would love to develop more housing, let's say in the San Francisco area, but there are a lot of, as my daughter says, greenies. People who want to preserve the landscape as it is. They want to prevent overcrowding.
Preserve their property values.
Exactly. Not in
Sound like a
my
community board.
backyard. Okay, so there's an awful lot of that. Now, as far as LA goes, I find that the prices that I look at, because when I go to the West Coast, of course, I'm going shopping and looking at relative prices. I don't think for what you get in New York City and what you get in some of the, upper middle class areas of Los Angeles, I don't think there's that much of a spread. It's about the same.
You're right.
So it's just a mindset of, do you think it's a value to own your own house? A lot of people would say, with home ownership comes a huge responsibility. You've got to take care of the house. There's upkeep, there's gardening, there's this, that, the other thing. Some of these kids like the convenience of renting. And it's all
Well,
about
it's easy.
prioritizing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's easy. There was a time when millennials weren't buying much at all, if
Correct.
anything, here,
Right.
especially in New York City, because what was the reason? They liked their lifestyle. They wanted to go out with their friends. Yeah, they were paying rent, and yeah, it might have been a little higher than they wanted to pay. But they felt comfortable that at the end of the week they had money in their pocket to go to the bars, to go dancing, to go meet friends here, go on their vacations. I can't say as I blame them.
Right.
But then all of a sudden things changed and they realized, okay, so now I am making a little more money and now I do want to jump in. And one of the concerns I have is just as that was really kind of starting, interest rates kind of, put that wall of fear up and it's become crazy. Peter, let me ask you something though. I don't know if you work with a lot of investors, but yesterday I got an email from an investor wanting to buy something. And, and I'm looking at the list of requirements and I'm thinking, okay, well, he's so far off the mark.
What do you mean by that, though, off the mark?
I want a cap rate of X and I want to spend this and I want this size. And
Yeah.
They've always been off.
Well, but they've always been off the mark. But, I want to ask, though, what are they missing? The general, buyer out there kind of understands, I think, where we are or what they can or cannot have. But why are investors still not getting it? I don't know if you deal with investors at all, but I deal with a few of them. But it's like, okay, how am I haven't responded yet because I don't even know what to say.
Just leave them on red. You got to educate, tell them, knock reality into tell them what's out there, what's available, what their options are, how we can get creative and make them some money.
That's the only thing I can think of doing, right? Is educating them. And here's what it is. This is what the market says right now, and you either do it or you don't. I know where we're going with this one. Now, on to the next broker he'll go find. Because that's what happens with investors, right?
Yeah, the next broker will tell them, of course, I'll find that for you. They'll string them along, and then they'll find out one way or another. So it's it's just like you said, it doesn't exist. Someday maybe it will, but I don't think right now it's hard to get a cap rate that's worth anything, really.
I mean, I'm not even going to say the number that he's looking for because I'm thinking, okay, well, did that ever exist anyway? Really? Okay.
I'd be more optimistic. I'm sorry if I want to.
No, go right ahead.
Anyway, I apologize, but yeah, the moment I meet an investor, okay, so if they're living in New York City or the New York City area, I ask them where are they from or if they have a sibling in another city or whatever have you, and then I identify that city that they can relate to, and I say, well, okay, this $1 million home that is north of LA, you're only going to get, I don't know, $2,000 a month in rent. Here in New York City, you're going to receive $3,000 a month in rent. So it's pretty clear that we are the most discount opportunity for a prime city in America. I think we all agree with that. And it's just so easy for, to educate an investor quickly because we can just compare to the city or state they identify with and say, hey, this is where we're going to make more money. And, outside of everything else, we all know most of America went up by 50%. We're still trying to get prices from 2017.
Right. People don't understand that, though, unfortunately.
No, they don't.
This is such an opportunity. And when it comes to investing, I come from a family of investors, and my dad taught us to always be as contrarian as possible and stop acting like a lummox or a lemming. Just go against what the crowd is doing.
Because that's when if you want a great deal, you buy where nobody's buying.
Exactly. And that's now. And there are
absolutely, and there's more negotiability, I believe, right now.
And there are creative ways to finance that we haven't even discussed here yet. And and when you have an investor, yes, there are steep learning curves when you have somebody come in from out of town. If I always say yes, we're going to find a solution. I'm a problem solver. It's just a matter of how deep in the dirt and how creative you can be. Thinking outside the box is very helpful.
Well, isn't that well said? And that's part of the problem that we have in a lot of aspects of life, right? You get in that comfort box, you get in that comfort zone, that wall of fear comes down, and you stay there because you have no idea what it all means or where we need to go or what we need to do. So, maybe it'll pass, maybe the dust will settle, maybe I'll do whatever. With that said, we got to take another break. We are coming right back. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. Don't go anywhere. Okay, Greg, I wanted to ask you, so what are the potential long-term consequences of a prolonged, slowdown in the New York City real estate market? on the broader, economy, if the longer we stay kind of depressed and down from a buying perspective in New York City real estate, what's the long-term consequences?
Well, some of them you may not think of. One is the impact of tax revenue to the city.
Yeah.
The biggest source
That's a big one.
of non-federal aid that the city gets is property taxes.
Yes.
It's more than income
Yeah.
taxes.
Yeah.
The state, it's the reverse. They rely more on income taxes and property taxes. And yes, co-ops and condos aren't valued by using sales because we have a crazy system for that. But look at the transfer taxes they're not going to get. The mortgage recording taxes they're not going to get. State's going to have the same problem. And we've been fortunate that New York City and New York State finances have held up okay, considering. I mean, there was a lot of pandemic aid, but we're not going broke, so that's good. The MTA, that's a different story. The MTA needs a lot of money. They need more people.
Yeah.
But you look at what goes on, like you go out to lunch in this area here where we are, and restaurants are empty. Night, completely different story. But restaurants are empty because people aren't coming into work. So we need more people to move into these areas that want to be part of a neighborhood and a community and support the local businesses. And that's tricky. But I think that there are a lot of jobs tied to it, mine being the most important to me. But, I mean, maybe you need to keep the economist around long enough, but after a while, people know when bad is bad. They don't need to be told that. And then Greg may be looking for a new job.
No, you're
Vince,
not.
could we dive into this a little bit more?
Go ahead.
So 10 years ago, when I had the time to study this, and please tell me if I'm wrong, because you're the one who knows more than me. Now, my understanding when I studied this 10 years ago, things could have changed, is that when someone buys $1 million home and pays a $10,000 mansion tax and somebody else pays a $20,000 transfer tax or whatever crazy amount of money the government is taking, plus the mortgage recording tax, the elderly and our children, they're benefiting from this more than anyone. And then when we don't have all of these transfer taxes and mansion taxes, mortgage recording taxes, the people who are suffering are our senior citizens and children, where it's going into programs for the state and the city. It's not going into some, college debt payoff program. It's going to our schools and the elderly. So please share the details on that.
Certain revenues are geared to certain things, but most of it is just thrown in a general fund and spent the way you want. I mean, you could say that with police, libraries, fire departments, all of that. If you remember a couple months ago, Mayor Adams was talking about across-the-board cuts, and people are like, wait, there's not going to be an NYPD graduating class?
And he changed that right quick.
Well, because somebody pointed out, hey, revenues are better than expected. So, I mean, look, I worked at Rebney a long time ago in the 90s when you guys were moving here. We used to point out all the time that New York City real estate is the engine that drives the city's economy.
Yes.
Okay, the taxes and forget about that. When you talk about luxury real estate, even the people that have pied-à-terres here, the amount of money they spend, the couple of months that they're even in New York, supports 2 to 3 other jobs in the economy. And you see what happens when people leave an area, what that does to local businesses, how slow it was to come back after COVID because people had fled. Some of them didn't even flee New York City so much as fled Manhattan.
Right.
Brooklyn and Queens benefited a lot
Very true.
From that part. So I think that the city relies on real estate for so much of its revenue. And people forget too, and Bess points this out a lot, real estate agents aren't wealthy people. I mean, I'm not making any assumptions about you all, of course, but no, the average nationally, the average real estate agent makes about makes about $50,000 a year.
Yes.
And it's a good job for people that maybe are single parents, that need more flexibility in their work. And it's an important
Hey, I had a condo and a BMW at $50,000
Yeah,
a year.
see, look at that.
Do you still have a BMW?
No.
The same one.
No, I graduated to, never mind.
I don't have a car,
A
so I'm
Ferrari.
wondering how everybody's
I don't have a
paying
car
for
anymore either.
Okay,
My last
great.
car was a Mercedes. So
Because
it
I
is-
can't
Of
imagine
course.
having. But it's interesting in this economy. I don't need a car, right? Just like
No.
going back to the
Not in
people
New York
renting,
City anymore,
Because
I
I can
did.
car share. I can do whatever I want.
Well, that goes to the Gen Z problems in the younger generation, and again, it's about choices. Now, I'm not embarrassed. I lived at home until I was married. I knew by my early 20s I was going to marry my wife, And I said, why am I going to go get my own place
What a
now?
lucky girl.
I have more questions now. What year did you get married? How old were you?
He's
I was
really
married-
good.
Edit that out. Or?
I was 28 when I got married. I
Wow.
was
Oh, you
engaged.
were
a
young.
Man,
while.
if I lived with my father until I was 28, my whole life.
The advantage was I was the only one living in the house. My 3 brothers were all out.
Yeah.
So
Well, I was the favorite kid, so I could
So
have
was
stayed.
I.
But man, wow, because I just
no, but you know what?
I'm very envious of you.
It
Sorry.
was my wife was renting a place. We were going to have to pay for our wedding. It didn't make sense. Why was I going to be? I viewed it as being selfish, just getting my own place to have my own place.
See, the economists back then thinking
then.
about,
Plus,
the budgets.
In my early 20s, I worked for the federal government, so I was making $23,000 a year. Not Vince Rocco money. That wasn't available back then.
Carolyn, we talked
Yes,
about
dear.
interest rates. We talked about how, there's a level of fear and uncertainty. And, even though we understand that the interest rate at 7%, give or take, is pretty normal, pretty decent, pretty whatever. But you referenced a little while ago, yeah, they may be higher than what, some of these buyers want or expect, but there are creative ways to finance.
Exactly.
What are those creative ways? And help the buyers out there understand that, because there is more negotiability today, and you can probably get a better price today, don't discount the fact that, you can figure out better ways to finance.
I wish I were a banker, but I'm not.
I don't.
And one idea, one creative idea comes to mind is an interest-only loan. Some buildings, some co-ops don't allow an interest-only loan where you don't pay any of the principal down, but that's a strategy that I've used occasionally. Another idea that I share with my buyers, I do a lot of business with parents buying for children. And the parents, if you will, are a baby boomer age. And they have reserves. They have brokerage accounts. They are doing business, with Chase, Citi, JP Morgan Chase. So if they can take their assets and borrow against them, they get a lower interest rate. So it sounds devilish, but I've seen that work over and over again.
There are options.
So those are just two of the ideas that I've coached my buyers to look into, and successfully. So.
Okay. Peter, so in response to rising interest rates, here we go again with that elephant in the room.
Why did you mention interest rates? I feel like,
Whatever. It's
Enough.
because it's like ingrained in my head, whatever. Sellers, though, may need to adjust their pricing expectations to align with the current marketplace or the current market conditions, okay? Properties that are overpriced will linger on the market, as we all know. Properties that are priced right will sell and go into contracts sooner rather than later.
So true.
Amen.
So
I
true.
mean, it's, I remember this from, 22 years ago when I first became a real estate agent, and my first manager here said to me, if you price things right, it will sell very quickly. Don't use aspirational price. The first person I ever heard use the term aspirational price.
yeah.
Michael Goldenberg, okay? Price things right.
Yeah.
So now I got Michael's voice in my head.
Well,
I
there
can
you
give
go.
you
I have his
a
voice in my
fresh.
I had it in my head, too, while I was saying it.
I can give you a fresh example of exactly that. I've been working with a buyer, and I've shown her about 48 properties. Wow. All right, 48, and it's like being an Olympiad. But when we found the property that she loved, it was priced really accurately, fairly. The maintenance it's a 1-bedroom, $1,400, so the maintenance was low as well. There were like 5 people offering. It turned into a bidding war.
Yeah.
So,
Hello. Welcome to pricing correctly.
And I know from a seller's standpoint, it's nerve-wracking and a ballsy move to underprice your house or your apartment.
I love that strategy.
But
You make
it
the most.
works. It works. We had a property listed at Ellegren where it started out as an auction. So there was a bottom price for the property, brought in a lot of eyeballs, lots of bids, and it ended up being sold over ask, significantly over ask. So it's just different
It
strategies.
happens all the time. I love that strategy, but anytime, I haven't used it lately, but anytime I've spoken to sellers about, let's underprice it, they freak out.
Exactly.
My
I
question to you is, how are you making sellers understand what we all just said?
Sure.
Priced right, not aspirationally, you'll sell, and you'll sell quickly, and potentially you will sell over the asking price.
When I first meet with them, I explain the 3 pricing strategies. I just simplify it, because it is simple. You can underprice. You can, that what you just said would happen. You can price correctly, which is a safe bet, and you can overprice or aspirational price, and then assign the risk to each pricing method. And to me, if you are more of a betting person, pricing a little under, I think.
But give me a statistic, okay? Because I agree with you, and I think that's a good conversation to have with a seller. But what is the statistic on what the seller is actually going to pick, okay, out of those 2 or 3 pricing strategies? I know from my – go ahead.
They usually will go with pricing what is the market rate.
See, he's better than I am.
He's a lucky guy.
What is your opinion?
I mean, my opinion is half the people don't hire me because I'm honest. So I just have to live with that every single day, right? So apparently,
So does that mean the other half does hire you because you're dishonest?
no, they hire. no,
sorry.
The other half is hiring me because I'm honest. Apparently, he looks better than me or more handsome, so they're going to hire him anyway.
Well, I was going to say that too. I mean, if you want to, okay,
I don't know where that leaves us.
Well, that's why I became an economist. Looks are not really.
I mean, it is what it is,
But
right?
yeah, I mean, correct pricing helps us make money and helps us pay our bills. Incorrect pricing makes us incredibly depressed. I mean, gosh, I'd have to be on prescriptions if everything was incorrect.
Well, the problem with incorrect pricing, for lack of a different term, is it is stressful, and it becomes more of a chore and more of a problem. And when agents lose listings over time because they can't sell, they linger on the market, on and on and on.
Yes.
Then they say, well, I really don't understand that. What about overpricing? Don't you get? And maybe you need to update your communication skills with your seller and make them understand at some point.
Sometimes you get a seller who has a teeny weeny little bit of arrogance and thinks they know everything.
Sometimes.
Okay. And under those circumstances, again, if they're being so aspirational and so nuts, I will walk away from that kind of opportunity
100%.
because I can't
Not gonna get
handle
you
that kind of agita.
Yeah, we've all walked away.
And I don't want to strike on my record. You know what I'm saying? But if you have a strategy, if the property hasn't gotten an offer or hasn't gotten X number of eyeballs on it in 2 weeks or a month, you have that in the pricing strategy. Seller, if you want it, list your property at top dollar and it's not moving, no one's come to see the property, and it's a nice property, you got to initiate or start the second part of that pricing strategy.
Yeah, and I like that Peter does outline it. I outline it. I guess you outline it, meaning I'll reference if it's $1 million property and we price it at 1.1 million, then it has a 60% rate of failure, or if not 80%. And I write that out so we can go back to it in writing.
Right.
I tell all my agents,
Really
please
smart.
don't text this. Please don't
Yes,
say it over the phone.
totally.
It must be written
Totally,
on a
100%.
PDF. Thank you. Thank you.
You know what I say? I use the term reflection sometimes. When you're talking to sellers, and I happen to sell in a couple of buildings that I sell all the time. I don't live in the buildings, but it's like I'm the building specialist, whatever. It's like historical. Well, but after all, Vince, you're telling me the price should be this, but my neighbor, 5 years ago sold for $500,000 more, or whatever the number is, and I think,
Different market.
okay. Why are we having this conversation? I mean, I will be that bold nicely, but
yes, of course.
Why are we having this conversation?
Yeah.
I'm giving you the comps of
Current
not only the building current, or the last year or
Yeah.
two. We used to be able to go back a while. We can't anymore.
Right.
Well, if you
And then
sold in
also in the neighborhood.
2021, we could have sold it for the 2019 price. But now it's 2024.
Well, I don't bring up 2021.
Well, you
because
know,
that was
and
an
it's
anomaly.
interesting. I
Yes,
rewatched
true.
some of the podcasts. I loved what Mr. Peter Romer, am I getting the name
Michael
wrong?
Romer.
Michael Romer. Oh, my, I'm so sorry, sir.
Romer DeBas, attorneys at law.
Yes. So Michael Romer, anyway, but he was just emphasizing that in 2008, there were 20,000 transactions. In 2021, there were 20,000.
Good
And then,
memory.
Yeah, so 20,000 each of those years. So in 22, I'm so sorry, sir. Hard to keep track of what Mr. Romer is saying. But the bottom line is that there, it was 2021, 20,000 transactions, and then it declined by 30% in 2023. I'm mismatching.
22 into 23.
Thank you,
yeah.
sir. Sorry.
Mhm.
We'll have to edit this a little bit. But the bottom line is, I was really, really happy in 2010, right?
Well, who wasn't?
Honestly, I was incredibly happy.
And 11.
And no, I mean, I was just, I can't, I'm embarrassed to say what I was doing in 2009 to pay my bills. You know, I bought used shoes just because I couldn't afford new shoes. My assistant was making more money than me in 2009.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I swear to God. He
Oh,
was,
my God,
he
I'm
was
so
a
sorry.
blessing, yeah. No, and I was living in a fifth floor walk-up roommate
Yeah.
situation. And anyways, too much information to share. But the bottom line
No, it's
is,
relevant.
I was, well, I was living in my old
Look at where you
1996
are
apartment.
now.
Anyway, and I took my assistant to where I was living, and he was in shock because I wanted him to understand the hell that I was going through.
I think I remember who that
you know.
was.
Oh, you do? Oh, well, let's not say his name.
No,
but
no.
I get along with him now a lot. But anyway, no, I get along with almost all my past assistants now.
It's
But
a very
where am I going
small
with
world
this?
in real estate.
Yeah, the bottom line is that we are going to make more money this year because we had a 30% reduction in transactions last year. I think that Carolyn's children have more money than they're confessing to. I'm so sorry.
Well, but
know.
but we didn't get to the Gen Z problem because we're running out of time. But I want to ask all of you, you know, between now and the next couple of minutes, what are your predictions? Let's start with Peter. Between now, so mid-year, say, you know, May to the end of the year, where we were January through May, what do you predict the rest of the year? Keeping in mind, we also have a presidential election year.
Bug dump.
Wait, do you have an hour for that?
No, we don't do
Crazy
politics here
ass
because my hair,
election.
as I told you before, my hair would stand up greatly if you started talking. He knows, so we're not going there.
I always try to stay positive, and I think there is hope to what he was just saying. I think a lot of agents are going to leave the market.
Right.
I think they've already started that exodus.
The mass exodus, and I think it'll be survival of the fittest, for lack of a better phrase, and that buyers and sellers Q4 I think is going to look. There's going to be a lot of activity and fewer agents to support that activity.
Todd,
Are we on the election conversation?
no.
Oh,
Predictions.
Which conversation is this?
Predictions.
Well, predictions is
Now
that,
to the end of the year.
right. Is that if our Fed Reserve chairman is for Biden, he'll reduce the rate a little bit and we'll have more activity. If he's a Trump-appointed guy, so I'm so sorry, I can't resist saying he's a Trump-appointed
By the way,
guy.
they've both appointed him.
Oh,
Yeah.
Trump appointed him and Biden reappointed him.
okay. Well,
Exactly.
Biden rehired him, yes. Thank you, sorry, sir. But the bottom line is, I question all of the motives there. We're going to be busier. I'm already busier, honestly. I'm dealing with problems every single day as a broker.
Well,
of record for
problems
my
in our
state.
business is a good thing.
Yeah. So honestly, I had agents, I didn't have anybody contacting me with problems in January and February. And now
Yeah.
every single day it's a new problem. Oh, I'm being hired for 48 units. I have a buyer who brought another realtor to my closing because of the NAR settlement and all this crazy stuff. But it's every single day. So when we're busier, we're going to make more money.
All right, less than a minute.
All right.
Go, Carolyn.
I predict that through the end of the year, we may see a 1/4 point drop, maybe a 1/2 point drop in interest rates. And I think that as we get closer to the election, people are going to be further paralyzed. And I can't even look beyond the election because it so matters who wins and who loses. And I just say, put your seatbelt on and
Honestly,
enjoy the
fasten
ride.
for 6 months. I agree with you. Mr. Gregg, predictions.
Oh, wait, I have to have those?
Yeah.
I don't buy that presidential elections have any impact on the market that's noticeable, especially in this case. It's very emotional. We all have very strong opinions about one of the two people. They've both been president and the world didn't end. So
Unless there's a civil war that takes place because of the election.
See, now I know where you stand.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know where she stands.
No politics.
I do. Look, you're making decisions that are supposed to be for long periods of time. You're going to raise a family. You're getting your own first place. If you're going to make those decisions based on who the president is, you could be waiting for a very long time. I don't buy it. I think that the NAR settlement is an issue because it changes the whole landscape of the brokerage business, and now buyers, on top of high mortgage rates and on top of prices that are still very high in some parts of the country, you're going to go, wait, now I got to pay? I think that has to be worked out. But we never have certainty. There's always been a lot to worry about. We had a pandemic. We didn't know how many people were going to die. We've had terrorist attacks here. We've had stock market disasters. The resiliency of New York is a proven entity. I think things will get a little busier in the second half. This is not going to be a great year.
Mr. Music, who did I Will Survive?
Gloria Gaynor.
There you go.
We saw her sing it live at a Deal of the Year. They actually, I think they got her to do it.
On that note, We Will Survive. We're coming right back with my closing thoughts of the week. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back with my closing thoughts for this week. Once upon a time in the bustling city of New York, the real estate market was a constant source of change and turmoil. The prices of properties would fluctuate widely, and it seemed like every day there was a new development or renovation project somewhere underway. There were many reasons for this constant state of flux. For one, New York City is one of the most desirable places in the world to live. We all know that. We live here, with millions of people vying for a limited amount of space. High demand for real estate drives up prices and creates a competitive market. Additionally, the city was constantly evolving and changing, with new businesses and industries popping up all the time. This means that certain neighborhoods and areas become more desirable than others, leading to shifts in the real estate market. And today, we seem to be in a state of complete flux, and we need many changes. Ultimately, the key to improving the tumultuous and ever-changing real estate market in New York City is to prioritize the needs of the people who live and work here by creating more affordable housing, adjusting prices, and lowering mortgage interest rates. We can ensure that everyone has access to safe and comfortable places to live right here to call home. And that's our broadcast for today. Thanks to my guests for being here on set with me. You can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, or TikTok at Vince Rocco, or my website, thinkvince.com. John Wooden says, if you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over? And from all of us here at Talking New York Real Estate and the More Network, from all of us to all of you, all around the world, thanks for spending a part of your day with us. I will see you next time. Make it a great day. Goodbye, everybody.